the concept that Ethiopia was the only country in Africa not to be colonized by Europeans. Yeah. See, I know people that told me they were colonized by the Arabs. Is that true? But what about the message though? Like now, let's be honest. Like
exactly.
Have you heard of Sexy Red? Is her name Sexy Red?
We had this conversation, didn't we?
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about.
I suspect you could probably do that for many, many other African countries too. And when that happens, the game will change completely.
Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of my reaction to Robin Walker's visit to the Drazzy Show.
I was fortunate in visiting Black America. My book, When We Ruled, there's an American edition.
Okay.
And I invited myself to my publisher's house in America, William Paul Coates. You might know his son, Ta-Nehisi Coates.
I don't think I have ever seen someone pitch a group that you wanted to vote for you the way I saw Barack Obama pitch black men. I don't think I've ever seen that. But usually when you're trying to get a group of people to support you, you appeal to them.
Right, you don't chide them.
You don't chide them, call them out, humiliate them, try to embarrass them. You know what I mean? You don't vent your anger, because that's what that felt like, right? I felt like he was venting, like he was having, I think he said it himself. He was having feelings, and so he wanted to vent that. Who is the brother that you imagine in the barber chair, walking down the street, in the corner, in the bar, who sees that and says, yes, I'm now going to do it. You know, but that's a thing that I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is, but that is not an appeal to get somebody to support something.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's a commentator. If you Google him, he's a big figure.
Okay.
So what happened was, me and a friend, we invited ourselves to my man's house. And so I got to see how that segment of African Americans were living. They were living large, bro.
Yeah, because I know they've got some serious high society, and they've got their own versions of, you know, country clubs and gentlemen's clubs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other difference, of course, as well, that we have to acknowledge is, unlike Europe, America's a very right-wing country. So Europe, there's a sense of, we can't just let people starve. In America, they don't have that. In Europe, there's a sense of, someone had an accident, let's take them to the hospital. In America, first question, are they insured? So America doesn't have any social safety net. And so consequently, if you're a poor African American, you fend for yourself.
You know, they just made homelessness illegal in America. Can you imagine that? It's illegal to be homeless, but not illegal to make you homeless. Criminalizing being poor when you are made poor by a criminal system. You're not allowed to not have enough money to pay for your own survival, but they're allowed to make your survival too expensive to pay for. And if you have any blotch on your credit record, it may as well be a criminal record. You can't rent, you can't get a job, you can't secure housing, you can't get a car, anything. And they talk about China's social credit system. Well, you invented it. They've got your social security number around your neck like an iron collar. Everybody in that country has debt collectors chasing after them like bloodhounds after an escaped convict.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good point.
Yeah.
That's actually a very good point. So just before you came, Mr. Walker, I was going to ask you about your time in Ethiopia. How was your time in Ethiopia?
It was my second trip. So what happened was, I spent about 2.5 weeks just leading up to Christmas Eve. A lot of the time was spent in Addis Ababa. One of the missions we had was to get to a university called Mizan Tepe, which is in southwest Ethiopia. So it was a really, really good trip. We got a lot of business objectives done. And it's just otherwise just a wonderful country.
Okay. Now, how do you feel about the concept that Ethiopia was the only country in Africa not to be colonized by Europeans? See, I know people that told me they were colonized by the Arabs. Is that true?
but people need to be very, very specific about when, where, what. Because I say, well, show me the document. What date? Yeah. Bottom line, that didn't happen.
Okay.
But this is what it is. During the colonization period, where we're looking at around about the late 1800s, there were other Africans that fought back too.
When they all came to Africa to cut it up and share it between themselves, we put up a big fight for over 50 years. You understand? Nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that that is the real First World War, because they don't even refer to it as a war. You understand? These are the kind of things that we should learn and teach our children to build that power from young.
It wasn't just Ethiopia. The difference was that there was an American inventor called Sir Hiram Maxim, and he's the person responsible for the machine gun. And then when the machine gun got into the hands of certain European armies, they could return. And okay, they may have lost the first battle, but they returned and won the second battle. Yeah. In the case of Ethiopia, they weren't able to pull that off, which is why Ethiopia's gone down as, see, we smacked the Italians' butts. And they did. But they weren't the only people to have done that, do you see? It's just when other people did that, the conquerors returned.
Yeah.
So the Zulus famously defeated the British army at a site called
Isandlwana. Before we get to the battle that shocked the British Empire, let's understand who the Zulus were. Under the leadership of Shaka Zulu, a military genius, the Zulu kingdom in South Africa transformed. Shaka revolutionized warfare tactics, turning the Zulu warriors into an unstoppable force. Fast forward to 1879, the British, eyeing control over Zululand for its strategic and economic value, underestimate the Zulu warriors. They expected an easy win, but the Zulus, led by King Sethweo, had other plans. On January 22, 1879, the British and their colonial troops faced the Zulu army at Isandlwana. Contrary to British expectations, the Zulus were not just ready, they were strategic, using the terrain to their advantage and their famed bullhorn formation to encircle and overwhelm the British forces. The result? A devastating defeat for the British, with the Zulus securing a monumental victory that would echo through history. This battle was not just a military victory, but a symbol of resistance and pride for the Zulu people. It showed the world that indigenous forces could defy the odds and challenge colonial powers.
They did that in 1879. Not sure if my facts are right, but I think that's the right date. The Sudanese, under the El Mahdi, went up against General Chinese Gordon and handed his behind back to him.
Did you know a self-proclaimed messiah once led a rebellion that shook an empire? In 1881, Muhammad Ahmad declared himself the Mahdi, the Guided One, and rallied Sudanese tribes against Egyptian and British rule. His followers defeated one of the strongest armies in the world, even capturing Khartoum and killing British hero General Gordon. For 18 years, the Mahdiist state stood firm, a symbol of resistance against imperialism, until its fall in 1899 at the Battle of Omdurman, where modern weapons finally crushed their dream.
The difference is the conquerors returned with the machine gun.
I see. You know, that's quite an interesting point. They returned with more advanced technology. But what I would like to know is, why was Ethiopia never colonized? Because if you said they returned...
that's the colonizing... You see, that's the colonizing period.
Yeah.
You got to remember, the Italians did come back in during World War II. And they were able to firebomb Ethiopia from the air and take control of the country, which they did for about 6 years. But what it was is the period when everybody else got colonized, 1880s, that didn't happen. Now, what people don't tell you, of course, is the Italians did get Eritrea.
Yeah, I know that one, yeah.
So Ethiopia can say, okay, if you don't mention Eritrea, we were never colonized,
But again, I suppose it's a question of how much of Ethiopia did they colonize. They were able to hold on to Eritrea, but not the mainland.
True, but you're still losing a bit of your empire, though.
That's true. But you're still keeping what?
You're still keeping 90%,
Another question I wanted to ask you, because something that we talked about when I was talking on the phone, hip-hop music.
1, 2, 3, 4, hit. And the more relaxed you are, that's what makes it hip hop.
I know I'm jumping, but
That's okay. Cool.
what are your views on hip hop music? And that's for both of you. That's for both of you.
Our view is completely different.
Yeah.
We've discussed this amongst ourselves. He takes very, very much. It's a positive thing.
When Public Enemy, and I remember this vividly, my album was called Knowledge is King. It was going into a whole spiritual space about knowledge and being intelligent. KRS-One was saying Jesus was black. And Public Enemy was saying it takes a nation of millions to hold us back. That's all 88, 89, and by the time we got to 90, the powers that be said this black conscious movement is moving without radio play, it's moving completely underground, and there's an underground subculture of positive, pro-black, intelligent people. We cannot have this movement happening.
For me, I take a completely different perspective. Yeah, okay, you want to go ahead?
I personally think that there's a lot of common ground between the two of us. But in terms of, because I'm not into the negative portrayal of hip hop, my position is that it's an incredibly creative field, and for me, music, being a visual artist, is the closest thing to magic.
Yeah,
I think creating something out of nothing, and the hip hop generation were disenfranchised in terms of like where it started off in the South Bronx, in Harlem, in that kind of area, which was a highly creative space going back to the early 1900s, 1920s and so forth, in terms of art, music and so forth. It was depressed intentionally. But the people from those areas rose up, rejigged, reworked what had come out from the past and created something new. So that's my perspective. It's something, it's a force of, it's a movement which has shaped the world in terms of like popular culture, in terms of fashion trends, in terms of music. It's not just on its own, but it's influenced so-called dance music as well. And I see a lot of innovation with that. In terms of instrumentation, they had no instruments. But what did they do? They turned actual equipment, like what's in front of us, into instruments, turntables and so forth. So there is a lot that I see as being a continuation of like what.
But isn't that just because as African people we're very creative? We can turn anything into something.
Yes, but they did that, so that's what hip hop is.
But what about the message though? Like now, let's be honest. Like
exactly,
have you heard of Sexy Red? Is her name Sexy Red?
We had this conversation, didn't we? Didn't we? Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about.
So you know where myself and Robin agree is the message has been completely hijacked.
He is absolutely right. The message has been hijacked. It used to be something that was very positive, but now it's being used by outside forces to promote degeneracy amongst our communities, male and female. But I will say this, Sukihana is good in my book because she let that shit be known.
But as far as this music stuff, I won't be doing this music stuff anymore. I started this because this was my dream. And, you know, I wanted to make sure I could get me and my kids out the hood. It's always been my passion to rap. A while ago, I had signed a contract and I didn't know nothing about the business or this game out here. And just right now, I'm realizing that I signed my soul. I sold my soul to the devil. I signed myself to the devil. I don't even own myself no more. I sold my soul to the motherfucking devil, and I done prayed. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. You know, it's just like, I don't know if God can get me out of this, you know, and it's just like to the point where I don't even know, like I just want to say I'm sorry to my fans. I know y'all love me. I know y'all believe in me, but I can't.
She set up her camera, pressed record, confessed, showed remorse, apologized, and she sent that video out to the world. So now I know, and you know, and hopefully these little girls know that whatever you see her doing, she is contractually obligated to do. Now I'm sure it's a lot of people in the rap game and in politics and other areas of life that had that same kind of contract, that same kind of deal, but either they don't have the courage or the integrity to do what she did. So I'm not saying I'm supporting her or promoting her music, but I can't be mad at her.
When people start to see that we can make a lot of money from this, that's when the message was kind of like hijacked, or different. The way how it is that people who are coming with a certain mentality were given more opportunities. More money was put behind them, and so they were pushed. And so naturally, the people who were coming with the conscious messages, they would have to find their own avenues.
So the unfortunate part for gangster, quote unquote gangster rap, was they started to handpick what they were going to play.
And when the brothers was, going up into the record labels, looking for deals, record deals, if you're not killing somebody, if you're not selling a kid coke, if you ain't got one of the prettiest cars in the hood and the biggest chains and some of the flyest chicks, they don't want to hear it. So the little kids was going back home and then like, oh, okay, coming back up there and it's the same little kid that came in a week ago talking about, something that may have been okay to listen to. A week later, he a killer.
And this is the part that they went from not playing rap because they said it was too edgy and not melodic enough to playing the most profane rap and beeping the curses out. That's how bad they wanted to get that content on the radio. So instead of seeing that there was the Black Panther and the Mac, they started only showing the Mac. And the label is basically saying again, there's a group of people sitting at a table that don't come from where we come from saying, I don't think the hood will buy that. Really? Like, well, based on what? Have you been to the club? Have you been in the... No, I just don't think so. What about this record, nigga? Now that I think they'll like.
Same people who own the labels own the prisons.
Literally the same people?
Literally the same people who own the labels own private prisons. The records that come out are really geared to push people towards that prison industry.
The trend or the focus was with the slackness and the negativity. That got the major push, which means that it becomes a vicious cycle. And so that becomes, people are very narrow focused, it seems, in that industry. It's all about how can we make money? If I'm going to invest in you, do I know that I'm going to get a good return? If you're talking slackness, I know that there's a market for that. So I'm going to back you, and I'm not going to back Robin, who's talking about black issues.
Well, you see, this is where it relates to what I was saying to Mr. Walker before you came, right?
Yeah.
The Jewish community. Some aspects of the Arab community, because I know now it's changing. Certain Arabs are a lot more lost. They would hear this and automatically throw out the window. Why is it with black people? We've allowed it to become a culture attached to us to the point where if I talk to a white person and they say, what kind of music do you listen to? And I say hip hop, automatically they go, gangster. That's what they affiliate with hip hop straight away. When I try to say, no, I'm into conscious hip hop, they don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
So why is it that we allowed it? Why did we champion these people? Why did we call these people celebrities? Why did we celebrate them for them to even have that platform to talk the nonsense that they talk? Because I guarantee you could not. Look at Drake. He's mixed race, half Jewish, half black. He can't talk about the Jewish community the way he talks about his black side.
There's people who have built into their rules that they can't, charge each other interest. They can't set up gambling houses within their culture. The Jewish people are so smart, they say that we the people of God. We can't do it to each other, but we can do it to people who are non-people of God.
If you made an anti-Semitic record, it would never see the light of day. If you talked about any group, the Greeks, the Italians, and if you did anything disparaging to any of those groups as blatantly as we do to ourselves, they would say corporate responsibility, the record label would drop you, they put you down. The minute you do black on black, it's free speech.
Right? We don't even see ourselves as people of God. If we did, we wouldn't do certain things to each other. Right? Because it'd be like, I can't do that to God's people. That's crazy. I can't just sell them liquor and gambling and entertainment and keep them off their focus every day and then complain about why we're not making progress when I usually use my platform to keep us from making progress. Right? So your success is our failure.
Why do we allow this? This relates to your field of African history. Why is it that we allow all these people to come and tell us about our history, tell us about our identity, come and talk nonsense in our community? Why are we so passive? Why are we so blindsided to this stuff? Why don't we stand up and say, no, we're not having like every community where they might chop your head off for doing it, or they might take you to prison for doing it, or they might insult you till you feel shame for doing it? Why do we not shame these people? What is it with us?
I can explain that. Yeah, it's what happens when a community is disproportionately poor. When you're disproportionately poor and someone gets to make a lot of money and your community is disproportionately poor, you end up with a situation that person's money, you start to look at that person kind of in a complex way. I don't like what he's saying, but I respect the money. And when you have a lot of our community in that position, it then becomes, but you're chatting sense. But where's your money?
You may do something with your money good. You may have a turkey giveaway, right? You may do something for the youth every once in a while, but that's only because you trying to erase your sins and you're trying to justify, right, being the devil and saying that, well, sometimes I do angelic work, but you're still a devil though. And by a devil, that doesn't mean you have to stay a devil, but it means that your lifestyle is funded by the devil, right? Why you think they love you so much? Because you can be easily controlled and manipulated, and you don't have a consciousness when it comes to the effect that you have on the people. There you go. Because you're gonna justify it by, I got my money though.
This person's making money, you're not, you see. And I think there's a certain element of, you see, if our community was a lot wealthier, and the average baseline was a lot higher, you could discipline the gangster rappers, you really could. But because the baseline, the middle baseline is quite low, someone's making money, you're not. The gangster rapper can say, but look how much money I've got, do you see? And it becomes a hard way. How do you shut that person up when they've got bread and you haven't? That's the complexity that I'm talking about.
But you see, a sense of me agrees with you. Sorry, I'm going to let you get to it. But also a side of me disagrees with you, because the Jewish community, these rabbis are not rich. Am I misinformed?
The Jewish community, the rules of the game are very different to what we think the rules of the game are. I'm quite serious.
All right.
Yeah. Trust me on that one, bro.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, man. I just feel as if, regardless of money or not, someone should be able to be shamed for the nonsense that they talk. But yeah, you were going to say something, sorry.
Just jumping off the back of what Robin was saying, I think it's a complex situation. There is this equation with money. The people who are on the streets, they've shown a way in which you can actually attain what everyone is looking for: security, being able to provide for your family, being able to have enough, and also being respected. That's how things work, especially if you're a male. People may not talk about that, but people know that instinctively as a child. Also as well, children are not dumb. They know what's going on. They know how difficult things are.
Yeah.
Children know this.
Yeah.
So they're looking at this, even though they don't have the ability to articulate it. They know that as a young black male, that they are in a situation where their prospects are very limited. The opportunities for them being as successful as they want to be are challenged and checked right at the beginning. And so some of them view the street option as being the most accessible, even though they know that it's the most risky in terms of ending up in prison, ending up having their health being compromised, or violence being done against them. It's also more exciting. And so they are drawn to that.
But I just feel as if sometimes as black people, and when I say black people, I mean African people in general, because sometimes I feel as if there's too many of us. You have Caribbean people, you have African American people, you have so many versions of us. Sometimes I feel as if, how are we ever going to get together? How are we ever going to win?
That's a good question. And it does seem challenging, but things become a lot more simple once you make the distinction between being uniform and being unified. I'll allow the late, great Dr. Naeem Akbar to break it down.
The most malignant, sick, destructive force in our communities is this force of disunity. We can't get together. There's probably no group that's more diverse, more different, more various schools of thought than the Jews. They have all kinds of things. But if somebody says something about Jews, they all there. They all there as a single force. Because they understand that whatever else we may be, ultimately our faith depends upon our understanding that we are first and foremost in this world situation, Jews. You must understand that no matter what else goes on, no matter what else you may be in this world, first and foremost, you are an African black person. That's number one. That's number one. But look, we so easily buy into every kind of divisiveness imaginable. If we don't buy into a divisiveness they have given us, we create a new way to be divided. We've got to understand that it is not about Muslim versus Christian versus Nubian versus Hebrew. The Arabs don't look at us and say, my brother, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum, come my brother. They say, there comes a nigger. The Pope don't love you. Don't nobody care whether you went to NYU, Princeton, Yale, or Hampton. Who cares whether you are Alpha or Kappa, or AKA or Delta, or Mason? We don't use these things as instruments to our liberation. We use them as instruments for our own and continued destruction. We are constantly finding ways. Look, we should be able to sit down with any of our people, anywhere, and find some point of agreement. I don't agree with everybody who's African American, by no means. But this thing does not require us to be uniform. It requires us to be united. So the problem is that we need to understand that as long as we are caught up in these things that keep us at war with each other, we cannot pull together what's necessary to free ourselves. We tear each other's down, always looking for a flaw, trying to find something bad, dirty, distracting, so we can tear them down. And it's because of our own fear. We see a man standing up, doing what men's supposed to do. We want to find something wrong with him. We want to tear something down. We want to disunify, break it up, find something to destroy his credibility. I don't care how many flaws he has. Can you depend on him to stand up as a man when the battle comes?
They try and disassociate written languages with Africa. There are many written languages in Africa.
Because I remember I went to the British History Museum and I noticed that Egypt was in the European part.
And the amount of scrapes he had in Japan trying to not get married. Japanese women were flinging it at him, brethren.